Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. We have a great lineup straight from the UK. In the first hour, we're going to be speaking with Maria Wheatley about terrestrial energies to celestial influences. And in the second hour, we're going to be speaking with Gregory Sams about breaking news. Why isn't politics working? But Just Energy Radio is brought to you by SoulHealer.com and the Institute of Applied Energetics, where you can find out about all the products and services I've offered. If you've missed an episode of the show, please do go to the Just Energy Radio webpage. That's www.justenergyradio.com and check out the archives. While you're there, sign up for our weekly newsletter. We'd appreciate it. Or you can go to the Just Energy Radio page on YouTube. That's Just Energy Radio on YouTube, and check out the archives there. And when you get there, subscribe to the channel. We would appreciate it. And don't forget, the Institute of Applied Energetics has a completely new webpage. And one of the things that we offer on that site now is a program called Jumpstart Your Intuition. It's a free 50-page download where you can actually start to tap into your intuitive abilities. And what makes it best is it's free. I like free. So that's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. Sign up today. So let me tell you a little bit about Maria, and we're going to get her on the air. Maria Wheatley is a writer, dowser, and researcher of Earth mysteries, specializing in the geodesic system of Earth energies and ley lines. She organizes regular tours of sacred sites and medieval churches and cathedrals in the southwest of England to locate and interact with the monument's hidden energies. She has appeared on the History Channel, BBC Radio, and has lectured for the British Society of Dowsers. Her webpage is the Avebury Experience. I can never say that. aveburyexperience.co.uk. And her new book, brand new, hot off the press, is Divining Sacred Sites. So please welcome to Just Energy Radio, Maria Wheatley. Hi, Maria. How are you?
Hi, Rita. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm fine.
Well, I had such a good time with you the last time you were on the show that I'm just glad to have you back.
Glad to be back.
So, your new book is about divining, and you are a dowser, which you use your dowsing rods to divine sacred sites. Okay, that was bad. Anyway, but one of the things that I learned about you is that you're a second-generation dowser. And, we've never really talked about dowsing as a tool on the show, and I was hoping we can discuss that for a minute. And for the listeners that aren't familiar with the concept or the technology of dowsing, what is it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a really good starting point, actually, because dowsing enhances your kind of sensitive side. Some people can dowse, some people can't. Most people can. And you use dowsing instruments. And the most common sort of dowsing instruments are L rods. They're like metal, copper L rods, or they can be brass. Traditionally, old water diviners used to use like a hazel twig in a Y shape. But today we use the L rods and we use pendulums, and we use these Dowson instruments to detect different types of energy and to be able to interpret that type of energy. For example, some sacred sites are over particular types of very strong circular or spiral earth energy patterns. Then you can have another type of energy, underground water, that is, like literally falling from the sky and filled up in aquifers or underground streams. But they emit what's called geopathic stress. They're not good to live above. So divining or dowsing can detect these different types of energy and start to interpret it. Because if we live above geopathic stress areas, basically that's a collective word for negative earth energies, it can really affect our health. In fact, there was a long-term medical study done in Germany with over 7,000 people involved in this study. And the remarkable findings were this: the people that lived above geopathic stress zones, they were a third less likely to recover from an illness, no matter what sort of treatment they were having. It could be a typical treatment that's, like a drug treatment from a doctor, or it could be a homeopathic treatment or more of a holistic natural therapy. If you're on that geopathic stress, the body doesn't self-heal as fast.
Well, that's really interesting. Have you found, because I know you go to a lot of ancient sites or old and ancient sites, because some of them aren't ancient. But do you find that these sites are ever built over these stress zones?
Sacred sites were, well, the ancient designers of sacred sites, I should say, they were very particular about what sort of earth harmonics to site the ancient site upon. So, for example, places like Stonehenge, places like Avebury, the pyramids, all of these amazing power places and sacred sites, they were sited on harmonic energy patterns. Normally a circular earth energy pattern or a spiral earth energy pattern. I think I mentioned last time when I was on the show, those two particular patterns, one of which is called a geospiral, obviously that's a spiral pattern, are generated by deep, really deep underground water that is independent of rainfall, water that is generated inside the earth. Geologists disagree with that concept, but there's been a lot of research into water recently, especially by Dr. Gerald Pollack, who suggests that there is a different phase of water, and water under high pressure is H3O2. And I think that's the deep, deep yin water in the earth, which emits these harmonic patterns. Live above a harmonic pattern and you will have good health. And that's what the ancients were tapping into. That's what part of a sacred site is about. It has harmonic earth energy imbuing the site with power.
Well, whenever I think of, those energies, I always get images of like vortexes. But let me ask this question. Can you have a vortex that has positive energy, and can you have a vortex that has a negative energy pattern?
Exactly so. Yes, you can. I mean, some vortexes push out good harmonic energy, and some kind of pull energy down. They're more like magnetic, they pull energy down. And dowsing can easily detect this. But you don't need dowsing rods for vortex energy. It's that powerful. You go near it and you think, hey, something's going on beneath my feet. It's that sort of strong and evident in the landscape. But more than that, I've taken with me in the landscape a chap called David Webb. He's an engineer, very left brain, and he has some really great equipment where we can start to test the frequencies of these types of energy. And each time we find the harmonic energy, maybe a standing stone sited upon it, maybe part of a church altar sited upon it, it starts to give out a frequency that's in harmony with the Earth's frequency, the Schumann resonance, around about sort of 7 to 10 hertz. And that kind of frequency is good for you, unlike, really high hertz electrical frequencies and Wi-Fi, which are more detrimental to one's health.
Well, let me ask you this, and, how can you tell a harmonic vibration with dowsing versus a negative one? Or are you just able to tell that there is some kind of a change in the landscape using the dowsing?
There's a really simple way to do this, and it was first implemented probably about 70 years ago by European dowsers, especially the French dowsers. And what they did, they kind of did a circular disc, and within that circular disc, you have various different colors, for instance, and you have a polarity, positive or negative. And for example, you can carry this disc in your pocket, or you learn the colors after a while, you don't need it. But when you start off decoding sacred sites, you can use this disc and you can instantly find out what type of colors being emitted within the sacred site, what its frequency is, and whether it's good or whether it's bad or whether it's inharmonious or harmonic. And we use this as water diviners to test water. For example, if you're dousing water and you ask for its color harmonic and it comes up red, for example, that means that water that we could potentially bore beneath us is high in iron content. So you can really start to decode underground water and the sacred site through the color that's been emitted. And it's long been known by esoteric geomancers and masons alike that the earth emits 12 harmonic colors. And those 12 harmonic colors imbue ancient sites. And it includes one color called negative green, the most powerful type of earth energy on the planet. It was investigated by two French diviners, actually, and they both became quite famous because they raised the frequency of negative green. And one of the dowsers, I think he was called Chaumery, but don't quote me on that. I'd have to look that up to be 100% accurate about his pronunciation being French. But anyhow, he was raising the frequency of negative green in his laboratory. He was found 1 week later, mummified and literally dead because he'd raised the frequency of the Earth's own harmonic colors. Obviously not recommended, but that he became you don't do that at home sort of thing. But this goes to show the power of earth energy and its potential to be tapped into safely, so as maybe a free form of energy.
Well, and I think, and we discussed this when you were on last time, so for anybody that's listening and wants to hear this other conversation, which was fascinating to me, go to the Just Energy Radio website, because you can, and click on Maria's name, and you can access that archive too, because it was another fascinating conversation. And now I totally forgot what I was going to say. But I totally forgot. So I'm just going to move along. It sounds like when you are using the dowsing rods, you're almost using them, you're talking about accessing the different colors, kind of like a pendulum.
That's right. You can use a pendulum in the same manner. You could use a dowsing rod. And some people just use their hands. They allow their hand to be sensitive over the color dial to choose, to allow the underground water, for example, to give its harmonic color. For example, if it came out violet as the harmonic color, that's the purest type of water that the earth can create, or a particular type of aquifer water that's violet is very, very pure and really very good for you. So we can see that through different colors, we can start to understand the earth a little bit better. So some waters, they have all different minerals in, which you can start to decode very easily using dowsing. And then you can go into your own home and have a look at, have I got underground streams in my own home? That means it could be potentially geopathic stress on that little dial, and that will be featured in the book, and the book will be out in about sort of 3 months' time. It's just been prepared now. You can literally see if it's geopathic stress, because it will come out either negative green or come out black or grey, meaning pollution beneath your feet. And there are easy ways to negate any kind of geopathic stress as well. You can get some devices, or you simply move yourself away from it, because geopathic stress is long-term build-up. And it's so our beds, where we spend a lot of time above, like 8 hours or 6 hours or whatever, you don't want your bed above a geopathic stress zone. But if you're just moving around your house, it doesn't really matter too much. But it's literally where you sleep. So just by using dowsing, we can go into our homes and we can start to understand why particular rooms have a certain atmosphere, why we kind of maybe get a headache in one part of the house. And, you know, people say, oh, I'm in that room and after a while I just feel all stuffy. Probably because you're picking up on some type of earth radiation beneath your feet.
So I'm going to share a story with you, and you'll like it. So I was actually, it was on my Thanksgiving show. I opened up the phone lines and actually will do readings on the air. And I had a woman call in, and she was having all these problems in her house. And I said to her, so from where your house is, if you make a left and you go over like 3 pieces of property, there's a vortex that's just right there, and it's a huge vortex, and you're on the outer edge of the vortex, but you're still in the vortex. She goes, oh yeah, 3 properties over is the cemetery. And so I was like, oh, okay. And so then I said, oh, and then you have this other issue going on. I go, you know, I just get the impression that there's running water, that one runs through the cemetery over across your property. She goes, yeah, I have a stream in the back of my house. And so her question is, well, what can I do? And I just basically told her that she needed to move. I mean, because you can't change it. You know, it's the earth energy. No matter how much you want to change it, that's just how it is, I would think.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Rita. There's a lot of diviners out there that really try to change the courses of the earth flows. And really, Gaia,
Really?
yeah,
Really?
oh, they do, yeah. And sometimes they use what's called a metal stake, and they start to tap the metal stake into the earth as if Gaia is some kind of vampish ghoul. I mean, I really don't advocate moving an energy line whatsoever, because it's Gaia's energetic ecosystem, and you start tampering. If I started moving your lungs around, or if I started moving your organs around, you're going to get, you know, pretty ill. So I always say to people, just like you said to that lady that was on the show, it's better really not to tamper with it. You can raise the frequency within your home to harmonize that area in which you live, but let everything else flow naturally, because what we might not like as humans, other life forms do like. So, you know, Gaia is supplying her whole children, her whole life diverse that lives on this planet, the ability to tap into the energy line. So a good one for us may be bad for another species.
Well, and it just seems like if you start doing stuff like that, it's just a matter of time before it's going to backfire.
Exactly. So I always suggest to people we can easily harmonize where you live, and you let everything else free flow around you, just like Mother Nature intended. But the ancients were very acute and very aware of where these earth lines and these earth spirals flowed. And I think that's what they were looking for worldwide. It's almost like they were creating a whole global network that interlaces with smaller veins of earth energy connecting site after site after site. And in ancient China, for example, they changed the whole topography of their landscape. They would make a sharp, pointed hill, for example, more rounded, so the chi energy would flow harmoniously all around their landscape. And to a certain degree, the ancient geomancers over here in ancient Britain, with sites like Stonehenge and Avebury, did a very similar thing. Not necessarily changing the whole topography as in China, but allowing certain ancient sites to be built around rounded hills. So I say to the listeners here, next time you go to a sacred site, whether it's Stonehenge, Avebury, or somewhere more towards the Middle East, have a look at the topography. You will always see a nearby hill. Because to the ancient Chinese and to the ancient geomants over here, energy flows harmonically over the hills, and it will come down into the valleys. And that's why a lot of ancient sites have avenues, because it allows the energy to flow right the way down the avenue into the heart and sanctity of the stone circle, or a pyramid, for example. And those deep underground aquifers were very important because they represented the esoteric center of the site, where all of the harmonic energy would be released. And many people feel this. And also, with all that underground water, the harmonic underground water I was talking about, generated by the earth, water has memory, doesn't it? It's a homeopathic fact. So in a way, these ancient sites are like the Earth's Akashic records. They record everything that was before. And a lot of people can tap into the holy history of ancient sites through the underground water. We ourselves are made up of water, aren't we? We're at least 75% water. So as much as our minds and our brains can record memories, I put it to the audience that our body water, that too can record memory, just like those homeopathic memories. And when our body water comes into contact with this sacred water, we can actively raise our consciousness to cleanse all of our body water.
Yeah, I'm going to go on a little tangent here with you for a second.
Sure.
Well, I'm not even going to put a date on it, but it just seems like, our water is becoming more polluted over the last number of years, with the whole concept of global warming and populations on the earth. There are becoming more and more quote unquote water issues. How do you think that's going to affect the earth?
It's right, there will be water issues. But you see, and a lot of people will say, towns will run out of water, so you have to have more taxes to do more well boring, and there's going to be water shortages. But the great thing about the geospiral pattern, which I said represented, the esoteric center of a site, or in the open countryside, you will get these spiral patterns. Wherever the earth produces that deep water I was talking about, it's perpetual. It will never run dry. You will have to bore down further, and geomancers have always called this primary water. It's the first waters of the earth. So I think if we managed our water correctly, we could have perpetual supplies of water. Water will never run out on this planet because the Earth chemically produces it deep within her womb. It's completely different to aquifer water. But you're right, the types of water that we tend to drink, through my tap in the UK, so to speak, has been gone through filter systems, and it's not particularly pure water anymore. So I think water, the way we treat water should be looked at in the future, because many, many years ago, I used to be administrator for a local hospital. And I used to kind of, do clerical work as well for the radiotherapy department. And one thing that was always given if you're having chemotherapy or if you're having RT was to flush the toilet twice, because your body is filling up with radiation or chemicals, and they expected a couple of flushes to, make that chemical go away in the water. Well, it doesn't. Water has memory. It will hold on to that. And we should really start to think very deeply about the water we drink.
I only drink reverse osmosis water because I live in Texas, and where I live, we have awful water. Awful, awful, awful water. But, and it's good to hear that the earth has a perpetual water supply, because I just feel like, they're drilling deeper, and pulling more water out. And I can't even imagine what the implication is if, we suck all the water out of the earth, and if these sites and if these energy structures are being perpetuated by the running water, or that's a big part of this whole cycle, what are we going to break the earth kind of thing? I mean, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, well, when you're talking about a rainfall aquifer, yeah, so the rainwater's filled up an aquifer, and they will be, reasonably deep. They can go down quite deep. It depends what era the water fell in. For example, you had a lot of rainfall in the Jurassic era, for example. So you've got some very ancient aquifers down there. Yeah, and you start kind of extracting, water all the time from that aquifer. It will eventually, create a hole. The water will go. Now, unless that type of aquifer has another channel, if you will, to a very deep ground aquifer that's perpetual and that's creating its own water, well, that's okay, it will filter up, but that may not be the case. So again, if we look at how we drill for water and we go to the right type of primary water that water diviners have spoken about for year after year after year and generation after generation, we won't have these problems. The trouble is with corporate companies at the moment, as I'm sure your listeners are more aware of, they're into short-term profit. So they're not looking at the overall long-term plan of how we manage our lives and how we manage our water for ourselves and our future generations. Therein lies the problem.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Which could be a whole conversation all by itself.
Yeah.
And so you've been talking about tapping into the earth energies. What is the implication? So they build a structure like Stonehenge or Avery. I can never say that. B just throws me off every time. Anyway, but why? What is the implication for either us as humans or anybody of finding that spot, finding the perfect spot and then building something on top?
Yes, well, over here in the UK, for example, we tend to have a lot of megalithic sites like stone circles, just like Avebury and just like Stonehenge. We also tend to have a lot of mounds, like Silbury Hill. And it looks like an earthen mound, for example, but beneath the grass, if you took it back to its original design structure, for instance, it's a 7-step chalk pyramid. Yeah, that was then rounded off to make it look like a very, very large mound. Now, these type of mounds, they appear worldwide. They're in Russia, for example. It can be in India, Mexico, the UK, all around the world. And these types of structure, again, they're sited above the underground aquifers, which releases a lot of negative ions into the air. And also, what we discovered on the top of Silbury Hill, for example, is it has a really strong electromagnetic field compared to control samples taken at the bottom of the mound. So I think our ancient ancestors were really tapping into this energy supply. What they were doing with that energy, I can't really say with certainty, but I think they were more like prehistoric physicists that were fully aware of electromagnetic and static fields, and they could harness that type of energy. And also, I think they could create, with those electrostatic fields, different effects to do with the landscape and to do with people's health. So I think they were kind of vital centers where they were created to tap into the energy and to release it across the landscape. Because again, we've using field mills and various different devices. We found that around Silbury Hill, for example, is an extensive field that will eventually make you feel quite good if you stay in it for, over say like 20 minutes or so. But that field, if you imagine one mound and then draw a mile around that monument, that's the extent of the energy being released. They are vast. They push out right throughout the landscape. All sorts of different energies, from, like I said, electrical frequencies to negative ions, all of which can be measured and recorded with equipment. So this isn't the kind of imagination of a dowser, if you will. This can be scientifically proved.
But see, that's really cool because, people have been making those comments for centuries, about the power at these sites. And it just seems really great and validating that, it's not just these crazy people running around with sticks going, no, there's something here. There is something there. And I bet that feels really great to you to have your work be validated.
Well, yeah, because like I say, many researchers have always, felt and people intuit that these are power places, and that's where the phrase came from, because people recognized there was something special going on at these sites. So I think, yeah, using the scientific equipment is a real must, because it shows also to the average public that there was something going on. And if we can really study the physics of ancient sites, I am 100% sure that will help us create new energy, new ways of living more in harmony with the landscape, for example. Because over here, we have very limited spaces to build houses. We're not like a continent like America. And I really think that we should start to look at where we build, the types of houses that we build, the shapes of the houses that we build, and where we build them is very, very important. If we can stay away from geopathic stress, or if we build upon geopathic stress, we harmonize it, we are creating harmonic communities. We're not creating places that will eventually affect our health. So in the long term, it's going to be a lot cheaper on what we call the National Health Service over here, and it will be a better way of living. And that's what we can learn from the ancients. And if you go to much later designers of like the cathedrals and Masonic lodges and that type of thing, they follow the same esoteric principles of our ancient ancestors. Where you site something is really important. It's even like, a buy of a house. They're always saying, well, over here anyway, location, location, location. It's really important. And if we look at the kind of esoteric and metaphysical principles of the landscape, that becomes even more important. So we can use all of these ancient principles to live a modern life today.
Well, and it sounds like what you're talking about is how they use feng shui in China. They are very particular about how their houses are placed and the direction and how rooms are laid out. And one of the things that I remember, I'm not a feng shui expert, but that you never want to buy a house where the grass goes down into the front door because it'll let in bad energy. So I'll like be walking through a neighborhood and I'm like, ooh, bad feng. Ooh, bad feng. Don't buy that house. And I have friends that are realtors, and where I live, it has a pretty heavy Asian community, and they say that it's really challenging because many of them have very specific requirements of what they'll accept and what they won't accept, for not just the inside of the house, but the placement of the house on the property.
Yes, I mean, one of the most famous Chinese emperors, Emperor Yu. Again, I'm not too sure how to pronounce that correctly, but he was probably one of the most famous masters of feng shui, and he documented a lot of what he did in 2200 BC. That's contemporary with places like Avebury and Stonehenge in their heyday, if you will. And he said that he used a divining rod to raise the frequency of the landscape. So what feng shui was in its essence, in it going back to its antiquity roots, was decoding the chi energy. And then you look for all the other things. So it was, really having a look at the chi energy. And if it was down, you would raise its frequency. And quite a lot of times in like feng shui from old China, you can do this using color harmonics. And you can raise the frequency by changing the color. And you can do that with visualization, for example. You can do that with setting your intent in various different ways. So the first thing that an ancient feng shui master would do was to look to what type of earth currents are beneath your feet. They called them lung mei, the power in the land, the dragon's breath. And they would look to see if it was male or female, which direction it was flowing, where had it come from, what type of hill had it come from. And they'd use all of this information then to realize what's the best placement, what can we site on that energy line that will release harmonic energy for the whole community. We've lost that because when we build, especially in the UK, for example, we're thinking about ourselves, us as an individual, not necessarily as a whole community. In ancient times, you only have to look at ancient settlement patterns of the Druids over here, ancient settlement patterns of the prehistoric people at Durrington Walls. They were the people that lived close to Stonehenge, in a place called Durrington Walls. All of these places are all sited in particular areas where there's a lot of really good earth energy and connected on really good what we call lays over here, or ley lines, and they link into each and other sides. So again, if we just look to how these people lived, and understand that the patterns that you can use dowsing to detect are really, really simple to detect. And this is what I show in my book, the types of energy patterns that the ancients looked for. And my book is compiled not just about my own research, or my late father was considered a top UK master dowser, but master dowsers before him. And they all looked, it was about 80 to 100 years of research into Earth harmonics in this book. And it shows the patterns that the Earth makes and how simple it is to find them. And I kind of give like little simple exercises where you can find them in your backyard, if you will, or in a park. You don't have to live next to Stonehenge to find these. You can find these patterns everywhere and anywhere. But if we can find them, we can literally interact with them. You know, whether it's in a park, you could find the best place sit, the best place to have your lunch, and just absorb the energies. And sensitive, intuitive people find them naturally anyway. And so it's a really good way of looking and decoding about the land upon which we live and learning about the energies of the land.
Well, that's really good. Because you never know, you might have your house be sitting right next to or right on a positive energy vortex, or some really good thing, or you might go to the park and find a wonderful place and be able to go there and meditate or just be and leave feeling better, which would be wonderful.
Well, yeah, and again, if we go back to sort of ancient sites and have a look at those, the ancients would develop different types of ley systems, for example. So we're all familiar with the term ley line. A ley line is a dead straight line, laser-like, going across the countryside. And if you have 5 or more sacred sites placed upon that straight line, you have a ley. And that's what a ley line is. It's energy going through the land, and sites are sited upon it. And for example, in the UK and in other countries alike, what the ancients did, they brought heaven to earth. They wanted to kind of link the terrestrial energies with more of the celestial energies above. So, for example, the very large sites in southern England, Stonehenge, Avebury, and some other sites I'll mention in a moment, they were all sited on a dead straight line. But more than that, each ancient site sited on the line, and there were 7 traditional ones, all represented a particular planet in the solar system. So, for example, let's take Stonehenge. Stonehenge has 30 stones going around the outside, each one with a lintel on the top. So it's a circle of 30 stones, and it has a perfect circle curvature on the top. Well, it did originally. That's what it looked like. Now, according to an antiquarian who looked into this ley line in the Victorian era over here, that's about sort of like 1746, he realised that the 30 stones that go around the outside of the circle at Stonehenge represented the planet Saturn. And it takes Saturn 30 years to go right the way around the zodiac to return to the place it was. It takes 30 years. And Stonehenge represents Saturn, for example. So Stonehenge represents in the sky the planet Saturn, and it's also like a gateway to the outer consciousness of the outer planets as well. So if we travel up that ley line and sort of say, right, Stonehenge represents Saturn, we'll go up the line, and the next gigantic site, probably about sort of 5 miles from Stonehenge, is called Casterly Camp. Now, Castley Camp was an ancient Druid city and learning centre. Yeah, it was where people went in the Iron Ages, just after the era of Stonehenge, but it was occupied long before then. And they built this huge, like, astronomical observatory on top of a hill, where you've got 360 degrees of like space above you. And at night, it feels like you can touch the moon. They feel so close. It's very, very beautiful. And this was where the Druids would teach a lot about astronomy. And in the old Druid tradition over here, they were called Cors, Cors. And a Druid core was a place of learning. It was like a university. And there's lots of other universities in the UK that's still famous today. For example, Oxford University. I'm sure some of your American listeners would have heard of Oxford and Cambridge universities. Well, they were sited on ancient Druid cores, just like Casterly Camp. And that camp there represented the planet Jupiter, and it's the largest core in the whole of England, and Jupiter is the largest planet within the solar system. It was reflecting it, yeah? So we've gone from Saturn to Stonehenge, we've gone through the solar system to Jupiter. Our next sacred site on that line, representing as well a near distance away from Mars to Jupiter, we come to Marden. Now, Den in Old English, Marden, means settlement, and Mars. So Marden means the settlement of Mars. And you had two very large mounds within that, and a lot of researchers think they represented the two moons that are associated with the planet Mars. So as we move up that ley line again, we would then come to a site representing Venus. Yeah, and Venus was
so no Earth one.
Yes, that's very good. You're 100% right. I'm glad that you're making me very awake here. Yes, indeed, you are correct. Yes, the Earth was represented by Silbury Hill, that gigantic mound I was talking about earlier. So yeah, you have Earth right where Silbury Hill is, and that is literally an earthen mound. Well, it's a chalk pyramid beneath, and then it was coated off in earth, and it is gigantic. So that was the kind of anchor of the whole of this celestial ley line, with each side representing a particular planet. And for example, Venus was a absolutely beautiful concentric stone circle about sort of 8 miles north of Avebury. Sadly, it got smashed to pieces in around sort of 1890, and the stones were ripped out of their sockets and used, sadly so, for road material. But that was the temple of the goddess, and there's one lone stone that survives today. And even if you stand by that stone, you really do pick up on this lingering feminine power that has this kind of energy all around you, and it's like mist. You can just about kind of make it out, and you can feel it against your skin. It was a very beautiful temple, prehistoric temple, contemporary with Stonehenge and Avebury. And there was another site on this ley line that equated to Mercury as well, and that was called Adam's Grave. And that's a huge ancient long barrow, which archaeologists say, was used predominantly for death. I don't think that at all. That was probably its secondary use. It was much older than what they think. And that represented the planet Mercury. So most of the planets of the solar system all were represented on this ley line with huge circular orbits around. And that's what the ancients designed. They designed heaven on earth. And Avebury, for example, represents the temple of the sun and the temple of the moon. So you have all of these planets incorporated, and this was all done in about 1846. And the word ley line hadn't even been heard of then. That's from the 1920s. So this antiquarian called the Reverend Edward Duke, who lived near Stonehenge, where Sting lives now, actually, where the rock star Sting lives. He lives in this ancient antiquarian place near Stonehenge. But anyway, I looked at this diagram of this ley system I've just described, and I thought, I wonder if I extended it using the same astronomical units as the ancients did, if we'd find the outer planets not yet known in Duke's era, like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Because if there was a sacred site on that line, in that precise place, it meant that our ancient ancestors categorically knew about the ancient, about the outer planets beyond Saturn, rather. So I decided to look for them, and I used the astronomical units with an astrologer called Lawrence Upton, and we measured them, and lo and behold, exactly on that place you'd have an ancient site. And Bellisnap, some distance away from Avebury, represented the planet Uranus. And again, Neptune's always been associated in astrology, for example, with the oceans, Poseidon and Neptune are all god of the oceans and of earthquakes and things. And right on the south coast in England, you have this incredible sacred site, an incredible sacred mound, and that's where Neptune is, right above, below is the seas by it. So that's such an appropriate place for Neptune. So I think our ancient ancestors created these massive ley systems, bringing heaven to earth.
One of the things that they talk about in the site in I always get the mixed up Technoticon, do you want, well, anyway, where the Temple of the Sun is and the Temple of the Moon, and they have said, okay, well, here's the sun, and they made, where the different temples were, they were proportionally the same distance to the different planets. And so did you find a similar thing that as you went from site to site, that there was a relationship in the distance, a parallel between the distance between the planets and the different sites?
In part, yes. And if not that exactly, it would be represented in the site itself. So, for example, like I said about Castley Camp, that ancient Druid core, that like university, it was the largest core in Wiltshire, and Jupiter is the largest planet. And also quite close to Castley Camp, which is on Salisbury Plain, which is over here, a huge area, a bit like your Area 51, it's military zone, you can't access it, So if you wish to go on Castley Camp, you have to make sure you're not in what's called a red flag fly zone, because that means there's a missile going over your head, and you're not allowed access. It's denied.
Yet another conspiracy theory. Maria, this hour has flown by. You were wonderful. I'm so glad that you came on.
Thank you, Rita.
So, your book, your website, if you want to give out all that information to the listeners, how they can get a hold of you, et cetera, it's your chance.
Yeah, sure. I mean, go to the website, www.theaveryexperience.co.uk. We do tours. We always welcome American visitors over to visit and interact with the earth energies of like Stonehenge, the crop circles and islands. And also I teach correspondence courses and Skype lessons, all of which are on the website. So, yeah, just check that out.
Cool. Well, you'll have to come back on. We can do this again.
Oh, definitely, Rita. Great.
Okay. Well, I think the music's going to come up here in just a second. And so thank you again, Maria, for coming on. And we'll talk again soon.
Okay. Take care. Bye.
Okay. Thank you. That's Maria Wheatley. Her webpage is theaveryexperience.co.uk, and we'll be back with Robert Feather after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.